Chapter 60. MS-026. Something bad is going to happen. Eddie blurted. Slow down, Phil Coulson said, frowning as he took in the man's panicked face in the New York SHI'd office. Calm down and tell me slowly. Eddie inhaled, glanced around as if the walls might be listening, and lowered his voice. I think I ran into something. Weird again. Coulson lifted an eyebrow. Tell me. Eddie explained, stumbling over his words, about last night when he'd been drunk. I went back to look for that vending machine this morning, but it was gone. It evaporated. An illusion from your drunkenness? Coulson asked. How would that explain this? Eddie said, producing a sketchbook. I don't remember everything clearly, but I drew from memory. Look. Coulson flipped it open. The first drawing was of an ordinary vending machine. The next images were stranger. A brown bottle labeled Assassin's Potion, the one Eddie had drunk, a grotesque mask shaped like some evil spirit, a fruit with odd markings, and finally a black book with Death Note stamped on the cover. Death Note? Coulson said, surprised. You were plastered, weren't you? How do you remember so many details? Eddie rolled up his sleeves and flexed. I have a good memory. He flashed his arms. The proof is right here. I used to be fat. Now I'm all muscle. I could take any of your agents. Coulson snorted. Is that a challenge? Prove it. Fight one of our men. He wasn't entirely disbelieving. Eddie had a habit of exaggerating, but he wanted to assess the man's abilities for himself. Eddie smiled, confident. Pick a strong one. I might not be able to hold back. Coulson led him to the gym and waved over a tall, handsome agent. This is Ward. He's one of my best fighters. Hi, I'm Eddie, Eddie said breezily. Ward nodded, snagged a pair of gloves, and tossed another at Eddie. Okay, let's see it. Eddie put them on awkwardly. Heads up, I haven't quite mastered my strength yet. I might hurt you. If it's too much, admit defeat. The casual tone and the tepid warning annoyed Ward. He stepped into the ring, hooked a finger at Eddie. I'll be quick. Coulson moved close to help Eddie with his gloves. Show me what you can do. Watch closely, Eddie said, stretching. When it was time to climb into the ring, Eddie hesitated at the railing. What would have been a difficult jump for his old self? He took a breath and launched himself. It wasn't a normal jump. His feet seemed to spring like coils. He shot 2, maybe 3 meters in the air and nearly knocked his head on the ceiling. For a beat, Eddie screamed and shut his eyes, terrified. To Coulson and Ward, he looked feather-light, floating across the ring and landing on the other side as if gravity had taken a day off. Coulson's expression went flat. This defied physics. According to S-Shield's incident naming conventions, this had to be cataloged, MS-026, the 26th anomalous event they'd logged. The number of these things kept growing. Eddie blinked, embarrassed. Sorry, I overdid it. He tried again, more controlled, and easily hopped onto the ring. Ward no longer looked condescending. The man was awkward and a little ridiculous, but he clearly had abilities beyond a normal human. Ward flexed, ready to go all out. Coulson cleared his throat. You two ready? Ready, both answered. Eddie struck a ridiculous pose and made a few odd noises that seemed meant to be intimidating. Ward took 2 steps back, uncertain, thinking Eddie had some trick up his sleeve. Coulson rolled his eyes. Eddie was trying to be cool and failing. For a minute, Eddie just circled, giving nothing away. Ward watched, suspicious. 2 minutes later, he decided Eddie was a beginner and lunged forward with a sneer. Eddie panicked. He started shouting and pumping his fists. From Ward's perspective, it was like dozens of shadowed fists filled the air. Before he could react, a blur of punches slammed into him. He went flying backward, collided with the ring rail, and blood started streaming from his nose. Coulson's brain supplied an old proverb, a random blow can fell a master. He hurried into the ring to help Ward up. Are you all right? Ward kept his hands over his face. I'm fine, he lied, mortified. Eddie rushed forward, apologetic. I swear I didn't mean to. It's just a nosebleed, Coulson said, quickly checking Ward. He sent the agent to medical for treatment and then let his mind take over the evaluation. Eddie's punches had looked devastatingly fast, almost like rapid afterimages, but Ward's injury was minor. That suggested Eddie's agility might be enhanced, while his raw striking power wasn't proportionally increased. Coulson was thinking body scan. Eddie, we're going to run a full check, he said. What? Another exam? Eddie's voice rose. We need to know what this power costs you, Coulson said. Nothing like this comes for free. But I was fine last time, Eddie protested. Coulson's gaze landed on Eddie's hair and went still. There were far more white strands than before. He said quietly, "You seem to have a lot more gray hair." "Maybe I'm just tired," Eddie offered weakly. "Or there might be another explanation," Coulson said. There was a long, heavy pause as both men considered what that could mean. Chapter 61. The Hand Doctor Lizard hugged a stolen coat around himself and crouched in the shadows, staring at the heavily guarded Osborne building. He cursed under his breath. "My equipment, my experiments, everything's still in that lab. If I can't get them back, I'll have to start from scratch." He had planned to break in on a windy night, but the Osborne building had just suffered a major incident and the place was swarming with people. He'd waited the whole night for an opening and found none. It wasn't the presence of strangers that worried him. If anyone saw him, the real threat might show up in an instant. After his rude lessons at the hands of S.Shield, Dr. Lizard kept his arrogance buried. There were humans out there who could match him. Caution was his only option. With more and more patrols on the street, he sighed, lifted the manhole cover, and vanished into the sewer. Inside the Osborne building, Norman Osborn hadn't slept. He paced, angrily dismissing the press chatter. "An attack? Ha! The media loves to make a spectacle. With our people on site, who would dare touch Osborne Tower? The superhuman serum is safe." Using military connections to stifle the story, Norman had rolled the incident into a minor laboratory mishap and assured the public everything was under control. Austin Group stock had barely budged, but the phones wouldn't stop ringing. Shareholders were persistent, annoying, but manageable. There were easier ways to silence them, Norman thought. Let them vanish one by one in a mysterious accident, and the problem would solve itself. He ended another call and let out a tired breath. Harry stood across from him, fists clenched and eyes burning. "Father, don't you understand? Who did this? They nearly killed people." "Calm down," Norman said, cool as ever. "How am I supposed to calm down?" Harry's hands tightened until his knuckles cracked. "They attacked Osborne Tower and stole all the superhuman serum. They didn't even think I'd be a problem. If they hadn't taken you seriously, they wouldn't have picked a time when you were cut off," Norman replied with a thin smile. "These are rats, small-time crooks hiding in the dark, not worth our time. Sooner or later, we'll crush them. Harry, your job is to be a good citizen. Cracking down on criminals will make them tremble when they hear your name." Harry let Norman's words sink in, and his anger cooled. "You're right. I'll wait until they show themselves, then stomp them out. After that, I'll patrol and see if any other criminals are stirring." Without waiting for a response, Harry threw himself through the open French window and was gone in a flash. Norman chuckled and sipped his black coffee. Both S.Shield and Hydra would soon find the flaw in the serum, he mused. With their resources, fixing it would be a matter of time, but a safer, side-effect-free version would likely be weaker. The question of whether to prioritize strength or stability would be a dilemma for the world. Either way, chaos would increase, and with it, opportunities for those bold enough to seize them. Norman leaned back, content. Outside, the sun shone uninterrupted. A few blocks away, Matt Murdock finished with the S-healed psychiatrist and smiled. "My mental evaluation's within normal range, but you should rest," the doctor had said. "I will," Matt replied. He turned and found Agent Coulson waiting. "The doctor says I need to rest." "You do," Coulson agreed, then paused. "I'll be in touch in a few days. There's some unfinished business." "Understood. I'll be ready." "Go on home. You probably haven't been back in a while." "Home." The word dropped like a stone. Stepping out into the warm sunlight, Matt pulled his hoodie up and let the brightness wash over him. He hadn't had a home for a long time, not in the conventional sense. Hell's Kitchen was home now. Since the fall of the Kingpin, Hell's Kitchen had not recovered. If anything, it had grown worse. The money-making ventures of the Handicap Society had taken a hit. Worse still, a new danger was moving in: the Hand. The Hand was an ancient, ruthless organization of ninja assassins, with its headquarters rumored to be in Sakura country. Its leadership was a council, Madame Gao and 5 other fingers, and the New York branch answered to Madame Gao. She had recently begun to expand her operations into Hell's Kitchen, focusing on a food trade, something they processed and moved through the neighborhood in secrecy. Under Kingpin's rule, the Hand had been kept in check, but with him gone, Madame Gao's ambitions stirred. This was the perfect moment to take over. Quietly, she folded local gangs into her network, used masked ninjas to take out rival leaders, and widened her influence block by block. But Hell's Kitchen was complicated. It wouldn't succumb overnight. To shore up her gains, Madame Gao needed a steady distribution channel for her food so the city's underworld and those it depended on would stay fed. In a dark factory on the edge of town, a group of ragged workers moved through the repetitive, grim task of processing and packaging whatever food meant in Madame Gao's logistics. She'd brought them here ostensibly to protect them from the chaos of the streets. Steady work, shelter, regular meals. To keep them from seeing too much, she had them blinded, literally, so they couldn't look around the factory and discover secrets. Phones and other communications were confiscated. Fully armed guards patrolled every corridor to maintain order and intimidate anyone who might think to resist. Not everyone welcomed this blessing. In the dimness, a lone figure moved like a shadow, slipping behind a guard and cutting his throat with a dull rapier. Another guard fell. The intruder's movements were precise, surgical. Alarms screamed as the monitoring room lit up. Someone was in the factory. Panic spread. Workers were hustled into a basement dungeon for their protection, while guards, their righteous fury inflamed, swore to hunt down and destroy the intruder who threatened Madame Gao's operation. The quiet factory boiled over into violence in an instant. Chapter 62, Surrender. Quick, Group 7's blockade, he's through them. He's gone. Group 7's all dead. How long has it been? Turn on the lights. No, the circuit's been fried. What? The monitoring room erupted in panic. The man in charge clutched the intercom and listened to the terrified screams. He couldn't fathom how a single person could cut through so many guards as if they were nothing. He still couldn't make out the attacker's features on the grainy feed. A ghost? A demon? People had been whispering about strange things lately. He'd laughed it off. Now he was not laughing. A chill crawled down his spine. Something behind him creaked. He turned, and a cane came swinging down. He didn't have time to flinch. The blow hit him squarely and sent him sprawling to the floor. Blood streamed from a cut on his forehead, but he did not dare reach up to wipe it. He lay there trembling and said hoarsely, "Ma'am." The woman who had struck him leaned on the cane, shoulders bent with age. Time had carved wrinkles and liver spots onto her face, but there were still hints of a once elegant beauty. Her eyes snapped with anger as she planted the cane like a rod of authority. "You're useless," she barked. "So many people, and you couldn't stop one man. What good are you?" "He's not a man," a guard stammered. "He's a ghost." "A ghost," she snorted. "He's the daredevil, evil-hating, yes, but he moves in the dark like it's his home." "But doesn't Daredevil—" "He never kills," another voice asked. Mrs. Gao's laugh was a blade. "Only a child believes that. Power twists people eventually. If someone surpasses ordinary men, the evil in their hearts finds a way out. You can pretend otherwise, but I've lived long enough to know human nature." She had seen too many things, too many rises and falls, to mistake restraint for permanence. In her view, the suppressed darkness Daredevil once fought against was merely waiting to break loose. "I've sent 4 shadow killers," she added. "Even the Daredevil won't survive them." Before anyone could reply, the control room door exploded inward. Matt Murdock, Daredevil, strode in, wearing a black tactical suit stamped with SH Shield markings. He shoved one of the ninja-clad shadow killers into the center of the floor. The man hit the ground, then crumbled. Dust, then nothing. The room fell silent. Mrs. Gao narrowed her eyes. The two had crossed paths before, the old hand leader and the blind vigilante who ran Hell's Kitchen's streets, and now at last they stood face to face. There was no fear on her face, only measured curiosity. "How did you kill them?" she asked. "They can slow the heartbeat. They're built to stop you." "It's simple," Matt said evenly. "I'm better." He stepped forward and folded his arms. "You lead these ninjas. Tell me, do you want to live or do you want to die?" The woman laughed, a dry sound that had the weight of centuries. "Young man, don't be arrogant. There are always those who are better than you." Matt's mouth twitched. "Words used to convince me. Now I find fists are clearer." He moved in like a shadow. Mrs. Gao lashed out, the cane stabbing toward his head. He was faster. He dodged, closed the distance, and drew the dagger hidden in his sleeve. In one smooth motion, he flashed the blade low, a red arc toward her throat. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the glint of metal. Mrs. Gao's pupils shrank. She felt it, the immediate animal threat of death, and for the first time in years, the hairs rose on her arms. Then she slammed her palm forward. A concussive gust knocked him back hard against the doorway. Matt sprawled, surprised. Pain flared through him, but his breath was steady. "What was that?" he demanded. "You didn't even touch me, and the force." He paused, listening to the steady thrum of his own heart. It should have been rattled. It wasn't. He frowned. Mrs. Gao's right hand flew to her neck. Her fingers came away red on one side. She had almost had her throat sliced. The shock of it shook her steadiness. For decades, she'd believed herself beyond that evolutionary fear. This boy had brought it back to her. "You rely on tricks," Matt said as he closed in again. "That's your mistake." "Wait," her voice tightened. "There is no need for us to slaughter one another, Daredevil." "There is no middle ground," he replied coldly. "There is life or death." Her survival instinct, honed over centuries, asserted itself. Her posture shifted from defiance to calculation. "I yield. Tell me what you want." Matt stopped. He looked at her as one might regard a tool to be taken or discarded. "You and your men will submit. You'll serve me. If you refuse, you die." She had faked surrender before, when it served her needs. Humility was a currency she knew how to spend. But this was different. This was young brashness, backed by raw strength. She considered the offer and the alternative, and the corners of her mouth relaxed into a small smile. "Very well," she said. "I submit, but I command only a fraction of the hand. There are 4 other factions equal to mine." "That's fine," Matt said. "So long as they stay out of New York, out of Hell's Kitchen, I won't trouble them." She studied him. "And your plan, son? What will you do with this city?" He inhaled slowly. "I'll take every gang in Hell's Kitchen and break them. I'll replace the kingpin. I'll be the order the neighborhood needs. No more evil running roughshod in my streets." Gao let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Why stop there? Think bigger. Rule New York." "Don't lecture me," he snapped. "Don't pretend you don't have ambitions. And know this, if you cross me, I can kill you." Her face hardened. Then, almost gently, she said, "We'll leave this factory. Help those workers leave. Tear this place down." Matt's expression was unreadable. She could no longer see the boy she had known, only a man who radiated a dreadful, close certainty. He nodded once, and for the briefest moment there was the faintest thread of agreement between 2 very different kinds of survivors. Someone whimpered from a shadowed corner, a worker or spy cowering beneath ruined machinery. "No, don't kill me. I didn't hear anything." Mrs. Gao snorted and straightened, reclaiming the cane. The red smear on the tip caught the light. "Daredevil?" she said with a hint of scorn as she turned to go. "He's a stubborn lunatic, useful perhaps, but a lunatic." With that, she put her weight on the cane and walked away. Every step measured, every movement regaining the old, dangerous elegance she'd worn for centuries. Behind her, the factory burned. Flames licked at the rafters and gutters, bright and relentless, an after-image of the night's violence that would not be forgotten soon. Chapter 63. Training. What? My bones are 10 years older than I am. At the Shield branch, Eddie Hood leapt to his feet, shock and dismay written all over his face after reading his test report. "And that vending machine stole $10 from me on top of that. It's cheating me out of a decade and my snack money." Coulson pinched the bridge of his nose, baffled by Eddie's priorities. Of all the strange things that seemed to follow Eddie, this was somehow the most absurd. Last time it had been a cursed parchment, and now his bones measured 10 years older than his actual age. Still, there was a silver lining. Eddie's fitness had improved markedly. Could this be the latent ability Director Fury had hinted at? Maybe it would turn into something useful. After a moment's thought, Coulson said, "Eddie, from now on you're officially a member of S.H.I.E.L.D., not just an informant." Eddie blinked, still mourning both lost years and lost dollars. "Oh," Coulson raised an eyebrow, "you're going to need proper training to control your strength. Come with me. I'll find the right trainer." Eddie, half listening and thoroughly distracted by his personal grievances, dazedly followed Coulson to the training room. As soon as the door opened, the smell of exertion and sweat hit him, bringing him back to the moment. In front of him, a striking woman with a powerful, athletic build was working a butterfly machine. Every contraction of her chest and flare of muscle showed calm, controlled strength. Eddie's eyes widened. He straightened up and did his best to clear his throat into something dignified. Ahem, excuse me. Coulson cleared his throat twice and introduced them. May, this is Eddie. He'll probably be joining your team. He hasn't mastered his powers yet, so he'll need training. Agent May glanced up as Eddie blinked at her, barely concealing a small smile. Training? Fine. Teaching rookies is one of my specialties. Eddie didn't catch the subtlety in her tone. He simply nodded too enthusiastically. May, Agent May, please teach me everything. Seeing they had no objections, Coulson gave May a brief look. Part warning, part encouragement, counted a discreet 2-second pause for Eddie, and then left the training room, closing the door behind him with considerate speed. That's one thing taken care of. Eddie's rough around the edges, but usable. I'll report to Director Fury and get this moving. Back in his office, Coulson rifled through a stack of dossiers and found a photograph tucked into one file, a figure in a red and blue suit swinging between buildings. Spider-Man. Maybe he could be useful too. High above the city, Spider-Man, known here as Uncle Ben, was mid-swing, the wind pricking his nose until a sudden sneeze nearly sent him careening into a building. He reacted quickly, shooting a web to the next rooftop and correcting his trajectory before landing on the eaves of a suburban house. Rubbing his nose, he called down, "Who's talking about me this time? Need a hand?" A small voice from below answered, curious and fearless. "Who are you?" Ben knelt on the eave and looked down to find a little girl of 4 or 5 standing in the yard, eyes wide. "Hello, miss. I'm Spider-Man. What's your name?" "Patty. Spider-Man. Can you get my kite down? It's stuck up there." "Of course, Patty." Ben peered at the antenna and found a swallow-shaped kite tangled high above. He carefully unhooked the line, brought the kite down, and landed lightly in front of the girl, holding it out like it was a treasure. "Here you go. Don't let it fly away again, okay?" Patty hugged the kite to her chest. "Thanks." A few adults stepped outside at the sound, bewildered to see their daughter playing with a kite, but no obvious explanation for the voice she'd been talking to. "Patty, who were you talking to?" one asked. "Spider-Man," she chirped. Feeling pleased with another small good deed done, Ben swung away from the quiet residential streets toward the denser, taller blocks of the commercial district. Where there were crowds and back alleys, there'd often be trouble, and trouble found him soon enough. A motorcycle roared into the road, 2 people on it. The passenger reached out and grabbed a woman's shoulder bag, wrenching it away. She clung to the strap and was dragged along the pavement, tumbling dangerously. Pedestrians gasped but froze. No one wanted to tackle a moving motorcycle. Ben didn't hesitate. He fired 2 webs at once. One latched onto the woman, the other onto the thief. He wrapped himself around a street lamp with his legs and yanked, and the pair went flying off the bike and ended up dangling, upside down and panicked, from the lamp. The motorcyclist looked back, saw his accomplice trapped, and immediately revved away, leaving him dangling. Ben eased the injured woman down, asked bystanders to call an ambulance, and shot a web to pursue the fleeing robber. A blur flashed past him, and suddenly 2 scorching beams slammed into the escaping motorcycle. The engine exploded with a roar, the bike became a fireball, and the rider was thrown skyward. As he came tumbling down toward the asphalt, a web appeared beneath him just in time to catch him, leaving him suspended and coughing in a web net. Ben peered up at the newcomer, frowning. "Haid, you went too far. You could have killed him. You know that, right?" The figure hovering above him stared down coldly. "I don't know. I just saw him try to hurt someone." "And you're not a kid. Call me Homelander," the man snapped, lips curling. He glared at Ben, red light flickering in his eyes like promise and danger. "Besides, if you don't teach these people a lesson, they won't learn. Did you hear them? They were cheering." Ben's jaw tightened. "You've got the power to take him alive, but you used lethal force. That's not your call to make. That's what police and courts are for." Homelander's smile was thin and full of contempt. "Old-fashioned and naive. That's the problem. I don't just stop them. I set an example. I think your loyalties are questionable. Maybe you should go to the station and explain yourself." A chill ran through Ben as the man's expression hardened. Without warning, two beams of heat shot straight at him. Chapter 64, Pursuit and Accidental Injury. Spider sense was a skill Uncle Ben had learned long ago. It let him sense danger before it happened and predict an opponent's next move. So when heat vision sliced toward him from Harry's eyes, Ben had already stepped aside. "Sure enough, you're not so easy to catch," Harry said, laughing. Ever since his fight with Kingpin, he'd been starved for a real challenge. The people he'd met since then were all ordinary, armed thugs and cowards, and it bored him. He felt himself getting rusty. Whatever the reason, he wasn't going to let Uncle Ben get away this time. "Hey, wait!" Ben was no kid and had no interest in an unnecessary brawl, especially with a crowd watching. What if someone got hurt? Harry ignored him and hurtled forward. "Ugh, kids these days," Ben muttered, flashing evasive moves with the help of his spider sense. For a while, Ben stayed out of reach, dodging Harry's strikes and firing off quick strands of web whenever his opponent got too close. Harry grew increasingly frustrated. He couldn't land a clean hit. Ben seemed to anticipate every move. Worse, Ben's sticky webs sometimes slapped Harry in the face or chest, making him look ridiculous. People in the crowd were whispering, pointing, and recording everything on phones. If this kept up, Harry's reputation would take a hit, and he didn't like that. Anger pushed him harder. He stopped holding back and surged, his speed kicking up a notch. Ben only had time for another flicker of evasive motion before Harry was on him. One solid punch sent Ben flying like a cannonball into a building's advertising sign. The crowd gasped. Ben coughed, hurt, but before he could fully assess himself, Harry unleashed heat vision again. Ben shot a web and swung away, Harry close on his heels. This was getting worse, Ben thought. If it continued, he'd be beaten to a pulp and hauled off to the police. May and Peter would worry endlessly. He only wanted to help people, so why did it have to be such a mess? Distracted, Ben misjudged a swing and Harry seized the moment, hitting him hard in the back. The blow snapped Ben's webbing and he went down. He crashed onto a passing car like a meteor. The vehicle careened, flipped several times, and only finally came to a halt after slamming into a fire hydrant. People screamed, "Damn it!" Ben gasped, pushing himself up on shaky legs. He clambered onto the wreck, peering through a smashed window. The driver and the front passenger both had bloody heads and were unconscious. Then he saw the passenger's face properly and froze. She was one of Peter's classmates. What are the odds? Ben's surprise was short-lived. He tore at the buckled door, but his injuries left him weak. "Damn it! You!" He rounded on Harry, who hovered in the air, and the anger in his voice softened when he saw the boy's confused expression. He swallowed the harsh words. "Homelander, what are you standing there for? Help them." Harry came back to his senses, teeth clenched. He dropped down and with effort tore the car door away. "Save her. Save my daughter first," the driver cried as he came to. His side had taken less damage. He woke sooner and grabbed at Harry for help. Harry didn't hesitate. He nodded, carefully lifted the girl from the wreck, and shot into the sky. In a blink, he was gone. The driver looked at Ben, struggling outside the wreckage, and breathed a shaky, Can you help me?" Ben offered a quick apology for the trouble he'd caused and got to work. At the Osborn building, Norman Osborn sat in his refurbished office, going over the reconstruction plans for the Super Serum R&D lab. Compared to the Lizard incidents, Natasha's situation, or the missing security teams, rebuilding the lab, and recruiting new core researchers after so many had died or vanished, was his top priority. He wanted the project back up and running without having to do everything himself. A sudden crash of breaking glass announced Harry's arrival. He appeared in the doorway with the injured girl in his arms. Norman looked at the trail of damage and, with an unreadable expression, said, "Harry, maybe I gave you too much pocket money." "Sorry, Father. I was in a hurry." Harry set the girl down on the sofa and was trembling with urgency. "Please help her. You can fix anything. I know you can." Norman sighed. "I'm not a doctor, Harry. Send her to a hospital. No, I don't trust anyone else. I trust you. You can save her." Harry's face pleaded like a child's. Norman allowed a small, almost amused smile to cross his features. He came closer to study the girl. Despite the blood on her face, he recognized her as Jessica, one of Parker's friends. The coincidence made him look at Harry with a new question in his eyes. Harry, catching the look, fidgeted nervously. Dad? Norman brushed the concern aside with a wry comment. Should I make you a green helmet while I'm at it? Harry blinked. Norman cleared his throat and became serious. Listen, I'm no surgeon, but the only thing I can think of that might save her is an injection of the superhuman serum. He hesitated. You know how agonizing that injection can be. She might not survive the procedure. Isn't the serum supposed to have been stolen? Harry asked. I kept 2 vials in reserve, Norman said quietly. Looking down at the badly injured Jessica, Harry decided without another second's hesitation. Her plight had come from his actions, and the only way to make it right was to try to turn misfortune into something better. He trusted his father's work. Failure was not an option in his mind. Do it. Move her to the lab. Inject the serum. All right, Norman said, already thinking through what would be needed. Okay, Harry breathed, relief and resolve mingling on his face. End of this chapter. Chapter 65, Return to Ancestors. Jessica was walking down the street, happily lost in her own thoughts, when a truck loaded with goods slewed out of control and crashed toward her. The headlights flashed so brightly she couldn't open her eyes, and for a second she felt frozen in place. Then, boom, she woke up in a start, blinking at unfamiliar surroundings, a room washed in white. Her hands and feet were wrapped in bandages, though her right hand had somehow come free while she slept. She ripped at the bindings. They tore easily, as if made from cheap cloth. Her mind reached for the last thing she remembered. She'd been going out with her dad to the newly opened amusement park. The car had been struck by something. Everything had spun, and then everything went blank. Maybe she'd been rescued. Maybe this was a hospital. She checked herself over. She was wearing loose clothes, clean, not hospital gowns, and her underwear was intact. No scars, but her skin looked noticeably paler. A heavy footstep sounded right next to her, as if someone were stomping in her ear. Jessica flinched so violently she vaulted 3 or 4 meters up the wall, her back pressed against the ceiling and her feet braced on the opposite walls, staring at the door that had just opened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then both made a small, surprised sound. You're Homelander. Harry Osborn, she managed. Harry blinked at her, just as startled by her sudden climb. How did you get up there? And, you're exposed, he said, awkwardly. Jessica dropped down as silently as she'd climbed, landing without a sound. She wasn't stupid. Something felt very wrong with her body. What did you do to me? Where is this place? Calm down, Harry said, trying to keep his voice gentle. Do you remember what happened? You were in a car accident, and your life was in danger. I accidentally injured you while chasing a criminal. I brought you here to keep you safe. This is the Osborn building. The Osborn building? Why didn't you take me to a hospital? Jessica's eyes were sharp and wary. Her day had been ruined, and now her body felt strange. Your condition was critical, Harry said quietly. There wasn't time. My body, you injected me with superhuman serum? She cut in. Harry's face went pale. You're very perceptive. Yes, that's what happened. The news hit Jessica like a physical blow. Stories about Homelander and superhuman serums had been all over the news recently. Plenty of her classmates idolized Homelander. She knew what he looked like, knew his name, but she had never expected to be the one injected. Part of her felt a childish, giddy thrill. Who wouldn't want the power of a superhero? But under that was a cold knot of fear. Her life wouldn't be ordinary anymore. Would she become a public figure, hunted and gawked at like Homelander? The thought made her stomach churn. Everyone reacts differently to the serum, Harry said, his expression full of discomfort. People's bodies are different. The effects vary. Well, how am I doing? Jessica snapped, folding her arms. Harry hesitated, clearly at a loss for words. There's a mirror in the bathroom. Go look. A bad feeling rolled through her. She rushed into the bathroom, and a high, shocked scream ripped from her throat. The reflection in the mirror was still a pretty girl, but her cheeks were marked with 3 thin lines on each side, like whiskers. Her ears, once normal, were now pointed and tufted with visible black fur. When she opened her mouth, 2 long, sharp canine teeth flashed like a predator's. She stormed out, baring those fanged teeth. Harry Osborn, what did you do to me? Harry rubbed his neck, embarrassed and guilty. I tried to tell you. A more scientific way to put it is that the serum activated feline-related sequences in your genome. You regressed, morphologically, toward cat-like traits. You mean my ancestor was a cat? She said incredulously. No, Harry corrected. It's not that far back. We all share a lot of genetic similarity with other mammals. Humans and cats are surprisingly close in many ways. From the way your features have changed, it's possible it's more like a big cat, lion, or tiger, rather than a house cat. Honestly, it can look pretty cool. Cool. Jessica forced a bitter laugh. How am I supposed to go to school like this? Harry pinched his chin, thinking quickly. The markings on your face can be covered with makeup. If necessary, I can arrange a skin graft. The ears can be hidden by hair. People won't notice if you keep them covered. Jessica let out a long breath. So there's no real cure? Not yet, he admitted. His voice was small. I don't have a complete solution. She sank onto the edge of the bed, head bowed. She was underage. How would her family, friends, teachers react? What about the rest of her life? Panic and a million tiny worries crowded in. Harry watched her, guilt written all over his face. He could be ruthless with criminals, but when he looked at the scared teenager he had hurt, he seemed shattered. He cleared his throat. I haven't even asked your name. Jessica, she said without looking up. Jessica, he repeated, steadying himself. Listen, there's another way to look at this. You're not ordinary anymore. You have strength and agility, cat-like reflexes. You could be, he hesitated, searching for the word, a superhero. You could help people. You don't have to hide from this. Like you? Jessica asked. There was a mix of sarcasm and skepticism in her voice. Yes, like me. Harry stepped closer and extended his right hand. His green eyes were earnest, almost pleading. He had been drifting away from his old friends lately. He wanted a companion, someone his own age, to stand beside him against the darker parts of the city. People need you, Jessica. I need you too. Jessica stared at his outstretched hand, at his hopeful face, and felt a complicated swell of emotion, anger, fear, curiosity, and something like possibility. The room was silent except for their breathing, and outside, life went on as if nothing had fractured. She didn't know if she could trust him, or even trust herself, but for the first time since she woke up, a sliver of something like resolve threaded through the fear. Chapter 66, New Suit. When Harry walked into the office wearing a sullen expression, Norman couldn't resist teasing. So our little Catwoman doesn't want to join the Patriot Alliance? No, she said she needs time to think, Harry replied, collapsing onto the couch. But you should know, Dad, this responsibility is heavier than it looks. Norman's smile faded. All right, let's talk about Homelander's mistakes. Harry couldn't sit still. Father, it's all Spider-Man's fault. If he hadn't been lecturing me and interfering when I was trying to subdue that criminal, I never would have attacked him. He was sneaking around with his mask on. Who's to say he's not a fugitive? Norman nodded. I understand how you feel, but the public doesn't see it the same way. Spider-Man has been helping people lately. He has a reputation. Yes, he sometimes damages property and leaves webbing all over the place, but the webs break down after a few hours. So you want me to turn a blind eye? A man who sympathizes with a criminal, today he sympathizes, tomorrow he could be the criminal's accomplice. Harry protested. No, not blind indifference, Norman said. That's exactly why we have to act strategically. You can't let your emotions drive your decisions. If Spider-Man's thinking is skewed, we need to correct it before a potentially powerful hero becomes a dangerous liability. How do you propose we do that? Harry asked. Norman's voice turned practical. Right now, our enemies have stolen at least 10 vials of superhuman serum. That could mean 10 new superpowered opponents. We need allies, more heroes on our side. So when I find Spider-Man, I want you to extend him an invitation to the Patriot League. Harry stared. Invite him? You want me to make friends with a... Yes, Norman interrupted. Bring him into the fold. And while you're at it, your immediate task is to recruit Miss Jessica. Go see her yourself. If necessary, I won't object to you using persuasion. Harry flushed, suddenly shy. He stood and left without answering, and Norman chuckled as he watched the boy go. He turned his attention to the stack of papers on his desk titled Plan for Acquisition of the Life Foundation. Whether or not the symbiote had already arrived on Earth, Norman thought it was prudent to be prepared. The Life Foundation had roots going back to the Cold War. Even without a symbiote, there would be valuable research to acquire. In the world of big capital, it was natural for bigger fish to swallow smaller ones. Better to make the move now than be caught flat-footed later. On a nearby rooftop, Uncle Ben woke with a start. He had driven Jessica's father to the hospital and, exhausted, had collapsed to rest. Night had fallen. The bruises and injuries from his encounter with the Homelander group were mostly healed. He hurried home, worry twisting his gut. Could Homelander have saved Jessica? He had to hope so. If she were dead, how could he face Peter? He felt culpable in the whole mess. At home, Ben quietly stripped off his torn uniform and changed. He glanced at the clock. Aunt May was probably watching TV downstairs, and Peter had locked himself in his room. Ben wondered what teenage boys did in private. Before leaving the bedroom, he checked to make sure his wounds were covered. Peter must have been waiting. As Ben stepped into the hallway, Peter popped out of his room with a grin. "Uncle Ben, you're back. Come see. I've got something to show you." Ben smiled despite himself. No matter how rough things got outside, coming home always calmed him. Peter led him into the room and pointed. On the hanger was a new Spider-Man suit. The new costume was a change from the old red and black. It had a blue base with red stripes woven into an intricate web pattern. It looked cleaner, sleeker. Ben couldn't suppress an admiring whistle. "You made this yourself?" Peter puffed up with pride. "Well, Aunt May helped a little, but I added some new features." "Uncle Ben, you used to work as an electrician for 20 years. You understand electricity, right? So I built a small current release module into the gloves. The web fluid conducts electricity well. With this suit, when you hit someone or hook them with a web line, you can send a jolt through it. It's not lethal, just enough to stun and temporarily paralyze, and the suit's material is insulated so you won't get shocked yourself." Ben listened to Peter's excited explanation, feeling his chest loosen. "That's brilliant, Pete. I love it. It's the best gift you've ever given me." Peter scratched his head, grinning like a kid. "I'm glad you like it. Oh, and Uncle Ben, I've got something else to tell you." "Yeah? I ran into your classmate today." "Jessica?" Ben's voice tightened. "Yeah." Peter told him about the accident, but he deliberately left Homelander out of it, framing the incident as a mistake that happened because he hadn't been careful. He didn't want Peter holding on to hatred. "Her father is okay now. I haven't heard anything about her yet." Ben's face went tight for a moment, then he forced a smile. "Don't blame yourself, Pete. Accidents happen. Jessica's strong. She can take care of herself." "She is," Peter said, managing a weak smile. Ben put a hand on Peter's shoulder and then pulled him into a hug. For a moment, the day's fears eased, and the two of them stood there in the quiet house, clinging to the small comfort of family. Chapter 67, New Members. The next morning, after Uncle Ben saw Parker off to school, he pulled on a new Spider-Man suit. He'd nicknamed it the Electric Suit. It was made of far better materials than his old one, and felt much more comfortable. After a quick kiss for Aunt May, he shot a web from the roof and swung toward Manhattan. A short while later, he landed on a rooftop and stared across at the Osborn building, wondering how to approach. He didn't have long to think. A figure suddenly flew out of the building and hovered in front of him with a frosty expression. "Follow me," the figure ordered. He didn't even wait for an answer before turning and flying back inside. Ben, tense, hesitated for a moment and then relaxed. He followed, slipping through an open French window and into a room where Harry stood behind a middle-aged man who had bowed his head. Ben's surprise was immediate. "My name is Norman Osborn," the man said, lifting his head and offering a friendly hand. Harry's father. Norman extended his hand toward Spider-Man with a courteous smile. "You're Spider-Man, right? Your suit looks a little different." Ben's stomach dropped, but he kept his face calm. "Of course, Norman Osborn, the man behind much of the talk about superhuman serum and the Homelander incident." Even so, Norman's manner was unexpectedly unpretentious. Ben offered a gentle handshake in return. "Yes, I'm Spider-Man. My old suit got torn, so I made a new one." Norman glanced at Harry. The boy curled his lip and said nothing. "I suppose you came because you were worried about Miss Jessica," Norman guessed. "Harry, go and invite Jessica in." Harry gave a quick nod and left, clearly impatient to be anywhere else. Ben let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Jessica's all right. She is, Norman said. It was a bit dramatic, but we ended up with a good result. He walked to the water dispenser. Coffee or tea? No, thank you, Ben said quickly, waves of politeness and discomfort mixing. He wore a hood under his mask and didn't relish the idea of taking it off for a drink. Norman handed him a glass of cold water instead and indicated a sofa. Let's sit and talk. Ben sank down. Norman's expression sobered. First, I want to apologize for Harry's behavior. He's still young. After he gained his powers, he grew a little arrogant. I realize how confusing it must be to suddenly have abilities you never had before. Ben wanted to say he'd never felt confused, that the principle of responsibility had always been clear, but he kept his reply simple. Anyone would be at a loss at first, but with great power comes great responsibility. That's why I do what I do. Norman smiled. Noble. Admirable. That's just how it is, Ben deflected, uncomfortable with praise. He steered the conversation back. Harry needs guidance. He's hot-headed, and he could go off the rails. Norman's face grew heavy. It's my fault. I've been too busy running the company to watch him properly. I need someone trustworthy by his side, someone who can guide him so he doesn't make the wrong choices. You mean? I'd like to invite you to join the Patriot League. It's a team of heroes I'm forming to counter whatever threats might arise. Right now, Harry is the only member. I could really use you. Ben's mind raced. He'd only come to check on Jessica. He hadn't expected an invitation to join a formal team. He was still trying to form an answer when footsteps sounded in the hallway. Harry returned with Jessica in tow. She looked as she always had, though there were faint lines at the corners of her eyes, and she seemed spirited and alert. Relief washed over Ben. Now he could tell Parker that Jessica was safe. Are you Spider-Man? Jessica asked, and her eyes brightened when she saw him. She ignored Norman and crossed the room in 2 quick steps, face lit with surprise. Yes, Ben said, startled by her enthusiasm. I have a friend who likes you a lot, she gushed. He talks about you all the time, says you're the kindest, the bravest. If he knew I was talking to you, he'd be so jealous. Ben blushed under his mask. From the way she spoke, her friend was probably Peter. He smiled awkwardly. Well, tell your friend I appreciate it. Hey, Harry, there should be paper and a pen around here, Jessica said. Can Spider-Man sign something for me? Harry scowled, but went to get them, unwillingly. Norman watched the small exchange in amusement, then grew serious again. Jessica, he said quietly, I want to apologize for Harry's recklessness, and I want to extend an invitation to you as well, to join the Patriot League. Ben looked from Norman to Jessica in confusion. Norman continued, To save her, I administered the serum. She's become a superhuman too. Jessica shrugged at the revelation. I'm not an adult. I should talk to my dad about a decision like this. I'm going to visit my father at the hospital anyway. He told me last night he was fine, but I want to see for myself. Norman turned to Harry. Walk Jessica out. You'll be late for school. Okay. Harry agreed without protest, and the two of them flew off through the French window. Norman faced Ben. You can decide for yourself about the league. Ben thought it over. He didn't like the idea of Harry going astray, and joining might keep the boy on the right path. All right, I'll join the Patriot League, but I won't be made to do anything against my conscience. Of course. Norman seemed genuinely pleased. Welcome to the league. One small request. Can you take off your mask? Ben frowned. What? We'll be operating together. I can't entrust the kids to someone whose name I don't even know. I will keep your identity secret. I won't tell anyone. Ben considered it carefully. It was a reasonable request, and Norman had made a strong case about the need for trust. Slowly, he reached up and removed his mask. Hello, he said. My name is Ben Parker. Chapter 68, Sacrifice. Because of Norman's warm hospitality, Uncle Ben had lingered at the Osborne building most of the day. When he finally left and went back out into the night to do what he did, he found a black car he didn't recognize parked in the driveway. That alone put him on edge. He slipped back inside, changed his clothes, then stepped back out and opened the door as though he'd just come home. In the living room, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline was talking with Aunt May. May, I'm back, he said. Uncle Ben stared at the stranger. Who is this? Aunt May smiled and gave Ben a conspiratorial wink. Oh, he came to bring some warmth. Maybe he's a community volunteer? Ben glanced at the man with growing suspicion. Is there some new service? The man interrupted. No, I'm here to see you. You're Ben Parker, right? Would you prefer to talk here or somewhere more private? Ben suppressed a smile, tilted his head. Let's talk outside. Come with me. They stepped into the yard. Aunt May, worried, eased up to the windowsill and lifted a corner of the curtain to watch them. What do you want to talk about? She whispered as Ben pulled the door closed. There's no time for small talk. I'll be blunt. Coulson looked at him with a steady, confident gaze. You're Spider-Man, aren't you? Ben opened his mouth to deny it, but Coulson continued, unhurried. Don't bother denying it. You avoid cameras when you go out, but we reviewed street surveillance from around Queens. It's not hard to lock down where Spider-Man lives. After checking dozens of households, yours stood out. You look different, much younger. Not just dyed hair or skin care, you look 20 years younger. Ben said nothing. His silence smelled like a scent. What do you want? He asked. Coulson produced an ID. I'm an agent with S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean you no harm. I came to ask you to join us. Your skills are wasted on ordinary life. We have a stage that's more suited to what you can do. S.H.I.E.L.D.? Ben glanced at the badge and shook his head. No, what I'm doing now suits me. I've already joined another team. Another team? Coulson frowned, then brightened. There's going to be a press conference soon. I'm sorry, I can't help you, and please keep this secret. I don't want my family dragged into it. Coulson exhaled and nodded. Okay, we'll keep it quiet. After Ben closed the door and went inside, Coulson stepped aside, pulled out his phone and said into it, Sorry, Chief. I think we have to give up on recruiting Spider-Man. At S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Fury set the phone down and stared at a document in front of him. He crossed Spider-Man's name off the list he'd been compiling, his tentative roster for the new Avengers. Most names were already struck through. Only Matt and Agent May remained checked. A handful had question marks by them. Captain America Steve Rogers, the Winter Soldier Bucky, Hawkeye Barton, and Eddie, the one Coulson had suggested. Captain America was missing from circulation. Hawkeye was incapacitated. Bucky and Eddie were under observation and not yet cleared. If only nothing had happened to Natasha and Clint, Fury muttered. S.H.I.E.L.D. was dangerously thin on personnel. After Bucky's revelations about Hydra's secret operations, Fury feared the agency itself had been compromised. The fall of Hydra, he'd always thought, had been driven by heroes like Captain America and the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D., Peggy Carter and Howard Stark. If Hydra had a network inside S.H.I.E.L.D. now, the consequences could be catastrophic. Fury's eyes lingered on Steve Rogers' name. It's time to find our Captain America, he said. They needed a leader with the right reputation, the kind of figure Tony had called for. No one fit that better than Steve Rogers. Fury walked to the safe, took out a scrap of parchment he kept hidden, and sat heavily at the table. The small sheet had a strange quality. No matter how crumpled he had made it in the past, it lay smooth again, the words that had appeared before fading to blank. The more Fury encountered its mysteries, the more he felt the thing was alive, cold, calculating, like a deal with something that had its own appetite. He spoke aloud to the parchment. Does the deal we agreed on before still stand? 1 eyeball for Steve's location. Words seethed onto the page. Sacrifice your eyes and 1 personage for the exact location of Captain America, Steve Rogers. Fury's face darkened. The parchment's terms were flexible and cruel. It wanted both eyes and a life. Fury weighed his options. He could not in good conscience throw away another S.H.I.E.L.D. agent at random, but he also could not hand over his own sight so easily. In the end, he made a choice. He found a way to fulfill the parchment's appetite without paying with a trusted agent. A few days later, a condemned prisoner, someone already slated for execution, was quietly transported into a deep, secure cell at S.H.I.E.L.D. Fury took Coulson and Agent May with him down to the holding room. He had moved his eye patch from one eye to the other. His exposed left eye had been replaced with a high-tech prosthetic after the original had gone necrotic. He had also preserved the other eye in formalin, an ugly, sterile glass vial on the table near the parchment. "Director, let me come," Coulson offered. "Not necessary," Fury replied. He asked the parchment, "How do I make the sacrifice?" "Place the parchment on the person's head and the eyeball on the parchment." The reply came quickly, as if the parchment could not wait. Fury stepped forward with steady hands. He spread the parchment across the condemned man's head and then set the glass jar with his preserved eyeball in the center of the parchment. He took a few steps back and watched alongside Coulson and May. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the parchment flared with an eerie red light. The prisoner emitted a high, animal scream. The sheet itself seemed to open, a bloody, tooth-like maw widening across its surface. It began to swallow. First the head disappeared, then the neck, then the torso. Arms and legs followed, absorbed into the parchment until the man was gone and only a wet silence remained. The red light faded, leaving the room smelling faintly of iron. Fury walked forward, forcing down the shock, and picked the parchment up. As the glow died, 2 numbers had appeared on its surface. He looked up at Coulson. "Looks like you'll have to go yourself." Chapter 69, Training Results. In the secret room, Fury slid a scrap of parchment across the table to Coulson and recited 2 coordinate numbers. "Bring everyone. Rescue Captain America immediately." "These coordinates are at the North Pole?" Coulson asked. "I think so," Fury said. "Publicly, we reported Cap flew the plane out of control toward the pole to avoid crashing into a populated area. He was declared dead. Who would have thought he might still be alive after all these years?" Coulson barely contained his excitement. "Director, I want to bring Bucky. He'll want to find Steve." "No," Fury's answer was blunt. "This mission is critical to S.H.I.E.L.D. We can't afford mistakes. Bucky's history makes him a liability right now. He stays in the safe house. If we get Cap back, they'll reunite." Coulson knew Fury was right, but still hesitated. "What about Agent May? I'm worried this mission won't be safe." "It would be safer with someone like her along, but we can't risk it," Fury said. "If Agent May disappears with you, the enemy will notice. She stays." Coulson swallowed and nodded. Fury added, "Take either Matt or the new guy, Eddie, with you." "Okay," Coulson said. Coulson left with Agent May, and Fury was left alone in the dim room. He turned the parchment over in his hands. Faint red lines pulsed across it, and his unease deepened, but he couldn't help probing for more. "Is there any way to revive Hawkeye, Clint Barton, without side effects?" he asked. A red light flashed along the parchment, and a line of text burned into view. "Sacrifice 10 people in exchange for a method to save Hawkeye Clint Barton." 10 people? Fury muttered. Exchanging 10 lives, even those on death row, seemed like a bargain to bring Hawkeye back. The worry was whether something uncontrollable would happen once the parchment consumed the lives. S.H.I.E.L.D. was stretched thin. The consequences could be catastrophic. He sighed and pushed the thought away. They needed to prioritize Captain America's recovery first. Hawkeye would have to wait and endure, for now. In the training room, Eddie collapsed to the mat, sprawled and sweating, gasping like a fish on a beach. He had expected training with a pretty partner to be pleasant. Instead, he'd met a drill sergeant. Slack for a moment, and he'd be reminded painfully why he couldn't afford to be sloppy. He missed the soft life at the nightclubs. The door opened. Coulson and Agent May stepped in. Eddie sprang to his feet and snapped to attention like a soldier. Coulson raised an eyebrow at May. "What did you do to him?" But May only nodded, expression neutral. "Show Coulson what you've been doing on the bag," May said. "Yes!" Eddie crossed to the punch machine with a determined expression, clenched his fists, and let loose. The display popped up 103. He kept going. The numbers ticked. 98, 101, 99, surprisingly consistent. Eddie breathed easier. Coulson looked impressed. Stability like that was hard to fake. "Eddie, how are you doing that?" "That's impressive," Coulson said. Then a heavy thud cut him off. A sudden, stronger blow sent Eddie skidding backwards several meters across the floor. Coulson's compliment died on his lips as he watched the young man tumble. May simply retracted her stance and said coldly, "Idiot, it's been weeks and you still can't control it. What an embarrassment." Eddie picked himself up, face flushed with shame and pain. Coulson couldn't help feeling sorry for him. Underneath the bravado, Eddie really was a good kid. He cleared his throat. "All right, that'll do for today. Eddie, you're with me." Relief flooded Eddie's face so quickly it was almost comical. He didn't even ask where they were going. "Yes, okay, right away." May snorted but said nothing more, deferring to her old boss. After they left the training room and closed the door, Eddie threw his arms around Coulson and sobbed. "Boss, you're my boss from now on." "Don't be so dramatic," Coulson said, pushing him away gently. And don't call me boss. Call me sir. Oh, sir, where are we going, sir? Eddie asked eagerly. Don't ask. Just follow me. If you want to be an agent, learn to keep your mouth shut. Eddie mimed, zipping his lips. Got it. How do you feel? Anything weird with your body lately? Coulson frowned at the delay before Eddie's answer. Answer when I ask you. Oh, sorry, Eddie said, sucking in air theatrically. Mostly I'm fine. I keep getting beaten by that woman. Also, at night I sometimes hear someone whispering in my ear. Whispering? Coulson's voice sharpened. What does it say? I don't know. I can't make it out. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. It just sounded wrong. Keep an eye on it. If anything else happens, tell me immediately. Will do, Eddie said obediently. Outside, in a rundown alley, a homeless man rifled through a trash can looking for anything edible. An illegal immigrant with no access to aid, he scraped by however he could. Today had been a bad day. His luck had run out, and the bin was empty. He was about to move on when he noticed a vending machine standing against the wall where there had been nothing before. He peered in and froze. Inside, among ordinary things, sat a fruit larger than a watermelon. If he could eat that, he wouldn't need food for days. He swallowed and stared at the price tag below the fruit. 10 years of life. He laughed bitterly at the thought. Is this some joke? He muttered. Curiosity and desperation overrode reason. He reached out and pressed the selection, thinking, if only my lifespan could be bought like this. Chapter 70. Demon early morning at Midtown High. Whispers floated through the halls. Did you hear that? Hear what? A demon. Someone saw a demon in the alley behind the school last night. You're kidding. No, really. It was 3 meters tall, 3 meters wide across the waist, horns on its head, and it breathes fire. Parker listened to the chatter, one corner of his mouth twitching. 3 meters wide at the waist. What, was the demon a giant beach ball? The rumor sounded absurd, but it was already convincing a whole group of classmates. Between Spider-Man and Homelander, the city had its share of strange things. Yet the idea of supernatural demons still seemed like a stretch. Parker didn't believe it. Lightning Thompson, who'd been sitting a few rows back, noticed Parker's expression and strode over with a serious look. Parker, you know my dad's a cop. Something did show up near the school and killed a lot of people. I don't know if it's a demon, but it's dangerous. No way? Parker's voice came out small. His relationship with Thompson had thawed a lot since the last awkward run-in. They were practically friends now, so Parker trusted him. Is that true? Thompson nodded. If they don't catch it by tonight, the school might have to evacuate students for safety. Parker, you should be careful. Hearing that, Parker took a breath. He wasn't afraid. Oddly, he felt a little buzz of excitement, as if he wanted to be the one to go after whatever had attacked. He scolded himself inwardly. He was just an ordinary kid. He couldn't fight monsters. He should stay out of it. Let Uncle Ben handle the real work. Be support, not the hero. Grateful for Thompson's warning, Parker went to find Jessica and tell her to be cautious. But she wasn't in the classroom. He checked the girls' restroom. None of the girls coming out had seen her. Class was about to start, and Jessica still hadn't shown up. A bad feeling prickled at him. He asked Thompson to cover him to ask for leave, then ran alone to the grove behind the school. He found Jessica there, panting, and in front of her stood a disheveled man. He wore an expensive jacket, but a floral skirt below, an odd, mismatched look. Green eyes flicked over Parker with a hungry gleam that made Parker's skin crawl. Jessica, who is this? Parker forced himself forward and stood beside her. Jessica looked wrong. Sweat stood out on her forehead, her bangs stuck up. Her pupils had narrowed into slits, and her grin showed 2 sharp canine teeth. She looked like an angry animal with its fur on end. Parker, why are you here? She asked. It's almost time for class. You weren't there. I got worried. Idiot! Don't worry about me. Worry about yourself, Jessica snapped, voice tight. She had been in the classroom preparing to nap when she'd smelled something dangerous. Curiosity and alarm had pulled her outside, and she'd found this man. Standing in front of him, the hair on her arms had gone up. She felt the predator from the top of the food chain fear, the trembling, the tension. She'd hardened without thinking. If she hadn't been worried the man might hurt other students, she'd have run already. Instead, she planted herself in front of him and braced, hoping Harry would arrive. The first person to show up, unfortunately, was Parker. "Parker, go away! Get out of here!" Jessica yelled. Parker took a step back, heart pounding. If Thompson was right, could this be the dangerous thing he'd heard about? He couldn't help the panic in his voice. "Jessica, let's go together." Jessica opened her mouth to curse when Parker put his voice through and said, steadier than he felt, "I don't know what's happened to you since the accident, and I don't like how weird you are sometimes. But I'm your friend. I can't leave you alone." At that, the man who had been watching them silent finally laughed. A feral smile split his face as he spread his arms. "Ha! You don't have to try to get out. No one leaves." Then he began to change, his clothes shredded, falling away in strips to reveal green skin underneath. His body swelled, his head ballooned, his face twitched and warped. He stopped resembling a man. It's actually a ball," Parker blurted, unable to help it. Whatever this thing was, it was oddly round. Before he could do anything, Jessica grabbed the belt of his jeans and held on. The world lurched under him, as if he were on a roller coaster. "Ah, slow down!" "Shut up!" Jessica snapped, leaping onto the branches above them and hauling Parker up with her. The creature rolled through the grove like a heavy tank, smashing trees in its path. It snapped up the fallen trunks and shoved them into its mouth as if it were a greedy, hungry machine. "I'm hungry. I'm going to eat you," it growled. Jessica hopped between branches with lithe, taunting movements. "Then eat the trash. New York dumps 10,000 tons of garbage every day. Help yourself. There's plenty to go around." She flipped the creature off as she dodged. Her aim was to distract and lure it away from the school. But the monster seemed unfazed by her insults. Irritated that it couldn't catch the two skittering targets, it gave up the chase and changed direction, toward the main school building. The classrooms were full of students. "Damn it, you didn't take the bait." Jessica breathed, setting Parker down a few yards away. Her voice was calm and fierce. "Run. Get help. Call the police. I'll hold it." She bounded away, moving with frightening speed until she was just a shrinking streak through the trees. Parker watched her go, jaw clenched, and then fumbled his phone. "Uncle Ben," he said as he hit buttons, voice shaking. "Something big happened." End of chapter. Chapter 71, Tentacles. The NYPD was still operating out of the shabby old headquarters while plans for a new building sat stalled in review. After the last strange incident, morale had cratered. Officers quit or requested transfers, terrified of returning to the station. Those who remained were stretched thin, and the department was running on fumes. Director Stacy stared at the report on her desk and sighed. "So your conclusion is another anomalous incident?" The middle-aged deputy chief, who had shouldered the blame for the previous fiasco, looked exhausted. Stacy had stayed on as chief by default, though she would have preferred not to. The endless stream of unexplainable events was taking its toll. The man's hair was already threaded with white. "Yes," he said helplessly. According to many eyewitnesses, it was a monster. About 3 meters tall, 3 meters wide at the waist. Some say 4 meters, as tall as a floor. It can swallow people whole. It's not something our officers can take on. If a creature that size is loose, it should be causing panic wherever it goes. "Have you found it yet?" Stacy asked. "No, we can't locate it. Witnesses say it can disguise itself." The deputy chief hesitated, then added, "There happens to be a high school near where it was last seen. Should we evacuate them as a precaution?" "Which high school?" Stacy pulled a map from the report and made a call. "Hello, this is S.H.I.E.L.D. We have a situation." She didn't finish the sentence before an internal line lit up. Her face went pale. "What? A monster at Midtown High?" Outside Midtown High, the creature had already revealed itself. It towered 2 stories high, grotesque and hulking. Jessica stared up at it, jaw clenched. She leaped several meters and brought her boot down on the back of its head with all the force she had. The noise of impact was dull and unyielding. Pain shot through her ankle. She fell to the pavement, clutching it. Her boot had slammed into something that felt like stone. This was the second time since the serum that her strength had met an immovable object. First the tree she'd tried to kick down, now this demon's skull. Still, the kick had its effect. The beast twisted and glared at her, then raised a hand large enough to engulf her. The hand came down like a falling boulder. Jessica barely rolled out of the path in time. The street exploded under the impact. pavement cracking and splintering, sending a tremor through the nearby teaching building. Teachers and students, thinking it an earthquake, poured out of classrooms in confusion and fear. "Look, what is that? Is it an earthquake? No, run! That thing's going to eat us!" Panic spread instantly. The crowd pressed into the stairwells. Students trampled one another, trying to flee. The commotion caught the monster's attention. Anger flared in its oversized maw. Dozens of thick, branch-like tentacles shot from its torso and lashed outward with terrifying speed, snaking through the air and wrapping around students before they could get away. Jessica gritted her teeth. She couldn't let them be taken. She lunged forward and began tearing at the tentacles, ripping several of the appendages in half. They weren't as solid as its head. With enough force, she could break them and free students. But each act of rescue drew the monster's ire. It roared and redirected every remaining tentacle toward her. They came in a blinding wall of writhing limbs. Space to move vanished. Before she could stop it, one lash tangled her right foot. More followed, coiling her limbs and stretching her out like a target in a cruel game. The constriction tightened, pressing the air from her lungs. Shame vanished. Only survival mattered. Flash Thompson, who had been helping teachers maintain order, saw Jessica ensnared. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fist-sized rock and hurled it with everything he had. The stone arced and struck the monster's head, chipping the surface and startling it. The beast turned, furious, and saw a bespectacled boy on the periphery, someone who had been flinging small stones at it already. The monster sneered at the boy and then fixed its gaze on Flash. Its rage was a promise of death. The demon opened its cavernous mouth toward Jessica. "I'll enjoy this," it snarled. Then two searing beams cleaved the air. Heat erupted and severed the tentacles mid-swing, slicing with surgical precision before slamming into the creature's chest. The force shoved it backward for the first time. Harry hovered down, eyes blazing, the hot light of his vision crackling with anger. At the same moment, a flurry of webbing shot out from above and behind the monster, snaring its legs and anchoring them to the ground. Uncle Ben, his webbing in hand, had fired the strands and connected them to a small electro-optical device. A current raced along the silk, electrifying the beast's entire body. It screamed and bucked, disoriented and in pain. Freed from some of the pressure, Jessica twisted and pulled herself free of the last strands. A grin, relief edged with ferocity, spread across her face as she glanced at the two who'd intervened. "Homelander, Spider-Man, let's take this ugly bastard down," she said, steadying her stance. Together, they closed in on the creature, ready to finish the fight. Chapter 72, Devil Fruit. Outside the school building, Homelander Harry, Spider-Man's Uncle Ben, and Black Cat Jessica stood together, facing the man who had become a demon. Harry wasn't in his Superman suit, just the hurried look of a student uniform, but he moved with the confidence of someone used to pulling his weight. The demon's feet were tightly trapped in webbing. Harry's eyes narrowed. He retracted a heat ray and flew in, swinging a full-power punch. "Careful. His head is hard," Jessica warned, but it was too late. Harry's fist slammed into the demon's gleaming forehead. The blow, powerful enough to mess up a house, knocked the creature off balance. It toppled and hit the ground with a stomach-dropping, dust-raising crash. Harry hid his trembling hands behind his back and tried to sound casual. "Humph, that'll do." Jessica looked him over skeptically. "We were all injected with the same super serum. Are you that much stronger? Don't worry about that right now." Uncle Ben had already leapt forward, spitting out webbing to pin the demon to the pavement. "Jessica, get Parker and the other kids out of here. Help everyone evacuate. Leave the fight to Harry and me." "Got it." Jessica moved without hesitation, snatching Peter Parker by the collar and pulling him along. Peter flailed and protested in a panicked, half-comic dance. "Hey, I'm not a cat. Grab my belt or something." She ignored him, shoving him toward Officer Thompson. "Thanks for the help earlier, even if it didn't do much." Thompson snorted. "I liked it better when you were quiet." "Good. Stay that way," Jessica replied, and they hustled the students back into the school to coordinate the evacuation. They helped anyone who'd been trampled or shoved and carried out those who couldn't walk. At one point, Jessica turned and looked toward the officers keeping order. "Hey, has anyone seen Lee?" Parker, still clutching at his jacket, shook his head. "No, I haven't seen him today. Do you think he's all right? Jessica asked, concern in her voice. He'll be fine, Parker said with the kind of confident shrug only teenagers could muster when trying to sound reassuring. Across town, in a quiet apartment, Levi, feeling too ill to go in that day, was sprawled on the sofa, being fussed over by Tom and Jerry. He munched a snack and toyed with an idea on his chin. In this Marvel world, the devil fruit had originally been nothing like the seafaring menace from myth. It was a lab item meant to create mutants. Levi had rewritten its code and turned it into something far more dangerous. The fruit now granted a person demonic power and a transformation, but it came with a cost. The eater's personality bent, and weak-willed people were corrupted fast. The man rampaging outside was a perfect example, gone mad the moment the fruit took hold. Levi frowned, turning the problem over. The beta version worked too well at reducing cognition. For the next build, he wanted the fruit to grant power without gutting the user's intelligence, or worse, rewriting their memories so they believed they had always been demons. For now, though, this prototype would expend itself in the field. Let it burn out. Let it be data for the pilot expansion pack. In S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Fury watched feeds of the giant demon and the oddly diminutive Homelander at its side. Agent May, he said into his headset, get over there and assess the situation. Prioritize evacuating students. As for the fight, leave that to Homelander and Spider-Man. Yes, sir. Agent May took off. Fury was alone in his office when a strange sound came from the safe. He frowned. There was only a single parchment in it. He hesitated, then opened the safe. A faint red glow pulsed from within. Fury wrapped his hand in a handkerchief, lifted the parchment out, and laid it on his desk. He unrolled it and saw a message written across the page. Sacrifice a devil fruit and receive answers to 3 questions. His eyebrows shot up. 1 devil fruit for 3 questions? That made it extremely valuable. Before he could go further, the writing evaporated and a patterned image of a fruit replaced it. Fury's mind raced. He remembered a similar fruit pattern from an old Coulson report. He pulled the file on his computer. Codename MS-026. Name, magical item vending machine description. Appears similar to a normal vending machine, but dispenses items with magical effects. Purchases consume 10 years of the buyer's lifespan. Examples, an assassin potion grants agility but causes whispered hallucinations. Other items include masks, fruits, and death notes with unknown effects. Activity pattern, unknown. Danger level, C, may endanger a small number of people. Seeing the pattern now, Fury realized the parchment's devil fruit was one of the vending machine's items. He scowled. If someone had bought a fruit from that machine and eaten it, if that's what had created the demon, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s assessment had to change. This wasn't a C-level oddity. It could threaten an entire city. Fury stared back at the screen showing the demon rampaging through Midtown High, and a chilling possibility formed in his mind. There's another option, he muttered aloud. Someone bought the fruit and ate it, and that became this. He spoke to the parchment. Where's the devil fruit now? The word Midtown High School flickered in reply. Fury shoved the parchment back into the safe and grabbed his jacket. This wasn't something he could handle from behind a desk. In the underground lab, someone else was watching the same video suddenly cropping up online. Sir, a technician said, there's a new clip. You'll want to see this. Let it play, Tony Stark said, not surprised that the internet had found the footage. He watched the giant demon lay waste to the school grounds while terrified students scattered. His bored, trademark expression hardened. Looks like it's time for Iron Man to show up in public. But sir, the tech said, Homelander, Harry Osborn, has already arrived on scene. Tony looked back at the screen and smiled, a cold, determined curl. Even better, let's show everyone that Iron Man is the one they can trust, not some underage show-off. Chapter 73. Devouring Mike loved mysteries. A few months ago, he would have shrugged them off, but after that night in the ghost story experiment, after seeing his reflection in the mirror smile back at him, he'd been hooked. The fear was still there, but so was a wild excitement. Mysteries beat singing and dancing any day. Even when the other members quit the club because they were too scared, Mike stayed. He scoured the internet for strange happenings and found countless like-minded people. He never expected the next mystery to break out right in his school. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mike's Mystery Decryption. he announced into his phone, propping it on the railing of the teaching building. Below, chaos reigned. Students and teachers scattered, while two figures fought the grotesque green creature in the courtyard. "Oh my God, look at that!" The big green guy is the star of this mess. An actual demon. People say it kills by eating them. I'm calling it the devouring demon. Mike narrated, grinning into the camera as comments flooded in. His stream blew up. Some viewers thought it was a stunt, but when Homelander and Spider-Man appeared in front of the creature, skepticism turned to a live spectacle. "Yeah, I was there," one commenter wrote. "Knock that disgusting guy down, Patriot." Mike rode the surge. The fighters are Homelander and Spider-Man, who's only just shown up recently. If anyone doesn't know Spider-Man, here's a quick. His commentary cut off when something grabbed the back of his collar and yanked him up. He let out a strangled, embarrassed yelp. No, I haven't showered for days. Don't eat me." "Who's going to eat you?" Jessica snapped, hauling him roughly toward the stairwell. "You're the only one left in this building. If I hadn't come back to check, you'd be dead." Mike exhaled in relief, then immediately resumed his running monologue. "Hi, I'm Mike, streaming the fight between the Homelanders and the— Oh my God, you're so strong, you can lift me. What, 80 kilos? Easy. Are you a superhero? Do you have a name? Hercules? Wait, no." Jessica hustled him down the stairs, 3 steps at a time, until the sudden drops made Mike finally shut up. At the bottom, she shoved him into the last car waiting by the curb and slammed the door. "There's no one left in the building. Let's go." The driver, white-knuckled, slammed the accelerator like his life depended on it and tore away from the campus. Peter Parker leaned out the window and called back, "Hey, Jessica, get in the car too." "No," she said, glaring at the battlefield. She looked so young and fiercely determined, Mike almost forgot to breathe. "That fat guy's wrong." She started forward as if to rush back into the fight. A helicopter roared overhead, and Jessica looked up. Norman hovered above, giving her a thumbs up before tossing a large box down to her. She caught it, puzzled, then opened it when Norman signaled. Her eyes lit up at what she found inside. 5 minutes earlier, after sending Jessica away, Peter's face under his mask had turned serious. He called to Homelander. "This one's tricky. Have you used all your strength?" "Full strength? That hardly makes sense," Homelander snapped, scowling. He wasn't looking good. His gaze locked on the devouring demon's chest, where earlier blasts had done surprisingly little damage. The creature's flesh was tough, almost like some unnatural armor. Homelander's brow tightened. He moved his aim upward toward the demon's eyes. "Spider-Man, hold its head for me." Peter didn't hesitate. Webbing lanced from his wrists, wrapping around the demon's neck and mouth. The creature thrashed and tore at the silk. With one savage rip, it shredded most of the webbing. Peter scrambled and leapt, grabbing a thick forearm with everything he had. Homelander wasted no time. His eyes glowed, and then beams of blazing heat erupted, making the air shimmer as they struck the demon's eyelids. The creature screamed, a shrill sound that made everyone within earshot flinch. In 2 seconds, the webbing that still bound it snapped, and Peter was blown back, thrown clear by the force. The devouring demon wrenched itself free and rolled onto its feet, fury burning in its red eyes. "Damn bugs," it roared, straining with all its bulk. Tentacles unfurled from every part of its body, dozens of writhing whip-like appendages that shot toward Homelander like a flock of venomous snakes. Homelander lashed out with his heat vision again, slicing through most of the tendrils. Freed from the writhing obstruction, he saw the demon stoop and seize a huge boulder with its remaining limbs. Before anyone could react, it shoved the rock toward its mouth and began to cram it in. Peter's breath caught. He scrambled back up, eyes wide beneath his mask. The fight was far from over, and this thing was worse than any of them had hoped. Chapter 74, Infinite Growth. Early on a weekday morning, Midtown High lay nearly empty. Apart from a few unlucky victims from the initial attack, most teachers and students had been evacuated. Only a handful of people remained to confront the devouring demon, and 2 helicopters hovered above the scene, a police chopper and the one Norman had arrived in. They kept a cautious distance and filmed everything below. The camera operator frowned at the feed. "Is that thing eating rocks?" he muttered. "Isn't this supposed to be the most intense part of the fight?" Harry had the same question, but it didn't stop him from continuing the assault. Fists did little. He quickly switched back to heat beams. The devouring demon, shielding its eyes with its massive arms, simply continued to snack on stones. Uncle Ben was worse off. His attacks were weaker, and his new electric shock ability barely fazed the creature. Are we just going to stand here and watch it eat? Harry and Ben exchanged a helpless look. Before either of them could act, a black blur streaked through the air at inhuman speed, passed just above the two of them, and dove toward the devouring demon. A familiar voice called out behind it. Homelander, Spider-Man, don't let it eat anything. Every time it consumes something, it gains the corresponding power. Is that Jessica? Ben asked. When did she get a new suit? Harry added, surprised. Norman had indeed outfitted her with a new battle suit, all black, form-fitting, with a Batman-style mask that hid the upper half of her face and left only a pair of fierce eyes exposed. Her long black hair streamed behind her as she moved. Hey, be careful, Harry called after her, but she only chuckled before springing into action. She landed on the demon's thigh like a cat, then extended all 10 fingers. Sharp alloy spikes flashed from her nails. The devouring demon, distracted by the stones in its hand, barely had time to react before a dozen crisscrossing slashes appeared across its face. What? It howled, more in surprise than pain. Jessica kicked the stone from its grasp, slapped 2 small spherical devices onto its torso, and dove back toward Harry and Ben. The charges detonated, sending a ring of roaring flame up the creature's flanks until the demon was momentarily engulfed. Nice! Ben called out, admiration in his voice. Harry allowed himself a brief smile, but Jessica frowned as she looked down at her alloy nails. Nope, its hide is tougher than I thought. My blades barely scratched it. Sure enough, the flames died off quickly. The devouring demon opened its maw and swallowed most of the fire. Its body was slightly charred, but otherwise intact. Jessica's face darkened. It even consumed the fire, she said. Ugh. Did you say it gains abilities from whatever it eats? Ben asked. Yes, Jessica answered, describing what they'd seen earlier, how after the demon ate a tree, it had sprouted tentacles like dead branches. It's growing. Ben took a breath. It wasn't this tall a short while ago. They all looked up. Compared to the nearby academic building, the thing had grown noticeably, now towering at nearly the height of a 3-story structure. Harry clenched his fists. If we don't stop it, it'll keep getting stronger. It could devour the whole city. A puff of smoke curled from the demon as if it had read their fear. It turned and smiled, grotesque and slow, then swung its head wide and unleashed a torrent of flame. Layers of fire crashed down toward Harry and the others. Harry's pupils narrowed. He grabbed Ben's arm with one hand and scooped Jessica with the other. With a convulsive burst, he launched all 3 of them upward, away from the burning sea below. They hovered high enough to watch the schoolyard turn into a blazing ruin. Sorry, Jessica said, guilt heavy in her voice. I told you what it could do, but I didn't expect it to eat the explosion. Harry shook his head. No, if you hadn't warned us, it would have been worse. Ben nodded. Now's not the time to argue. We have to take that thing down. Anyone have any tricks left? Silence answered him. Below, the devouring demon shrugged off the failure to reach them and went back to stuffing stones, clearly unfazed. Chief, they don't seem to be getting anywhere, one of the SHIELD agents said into his radio. Another helicopter cut through the gray morning. Furies. He, Agent May, and a team of SHIELD operatives trained their optics on the field and watched the 3 hero teams stall. Fury's face tightened. He'd assumed Homelander, strength on par with the strongest heroes, would either put an end to this thing or at least drive it back. Instead, their own countrymen were being held at bay. Adding one more Agent May to the mix wouldn't change the equation if this thing kept absorbing powers and mass. What in God's name is that? Fury wondered aloud. The appearance of more and stranger threats kept piling the weight on his shoulders. If even one of them spiraled out of control, New York could be in real danger. Chief, look. Agent May tapped his shoulder and pointed through a scope. Homelander had set the other 2 down a safe distance away and was streaking back toward the devouring demon alone. Harry didn't care about the spectators. His focus was the creature. In a blur, he slipped behind the demon, placed both hands on its thick waist, grunted, and started to lift. He hoisted. Inch by inch, the earth fell away as the devouring demon rose off the ground. Harry's arms trembled under the creature's weight, but he didn't let go. Higher and higher they climbed, away from the burning schoolyard, toward the one place the demon couldn't devour, the open blue of the sky. Chapter 75. The Last Fight. Harry roared, tensing every muscle as he wrapped his hands around the devouring demon that was happily crunching on rocks. Using everything he had, he heaved the creature, the size of a small building, off the ground and kicked out with his feet. Under the strained gazes of Uncle Ben, Jessica, and the others, Harry lifted the monster into the sky. They rose slowly at first, then faster and faster. This was the last gambit Harry had devised, modeled after the finishing move that toppled Kingpin: bring the enemy high into the air and let it fall. The devouring demon couldn't have learned to fly, could it? Among the people watching, only Harry could fly unassisted. This had to be done alone. "Harry, this is on you. Don't mess up," Uncle Ben called, his voice taut. Harry swallowed, biting down on the resolve, and pushed upward. There was only one thought in his head: go higher. But the devouring demon wasn't knocked out like Kingpin had been. As they left the familiar ground behind, the creature began to panic. It thrashed and twisted, its enormous bulk turning into a liability. Harry altered course to match the thrashing. Keeping his hands pressed to its body, it rolled and writhed like a massive, helpless ball, but couldn't throw him off. They climbed past several hovering helicopters. The school below shrank. People turned into tiny specks. The devouring demon, terrified, sent out a flurry of dead, branch-like tentacles, lashing at Harry. With his hands tied to the creature, Harry couldn't dodge. He lashed out with heat beams from his eyes, cutting and burning the flying tentacles, but there were too many. The beams couldn't slice and rotate fast enough, and sharp spikes at the tips of the tentacles tore through his clothes and lacerated the skin beneath, leaving angry red marks. Realizing he couldn't avoid every strike, Harry stopped trying to be flashy and conserved his energy. He closed his eyes and braced for the onslaught. For a moment, a bitter laugh escaped him. This was all too familiar. Let's see who lasts longer, he thought. The devouring demon quickly adapted. When stabbing couldn't finish him, it went for strangulation. The dead branches and tentacles wrapped around Harry's body and head, winding him like a mummy. The tightness stole his breath. For an instant, Harry's hands were free. He blinked open his eyes and blasted two blazing heat beams through the layers of choking limbs. The beams ignited the tentacles, throwing a red flare into the sky. On the ground, Jessica squinted up at the burning light and prayed inwardly. "Will he be okay?" "He will," Uncle Ben said firmly. "He's one of ours." Up in the air, Harry managed to wriggle away from some of the binding tentacles. But when the creature broke free from his upward push, its own momentum stalled, and it began to fall, tipping from its nose down toward the earth. Panic flickered through Harry. If he couldn't finish it now, the chance might be gone. A second time getting it airborne might be impossible. This had to be the final stand. With scarcely a second's thought, Harry moved. He slipped under the devouring demon. The two of them locked eyes and roared at each other. "Die!" the creature bellowed. "Kill," Harry answered. Two much thicker beams of heat burst from his eyes, slamming into the demon's chest and stopping its fall mid-descent. The creature opened its maw and spewed a sea of fire. Harry darted aside to avoid the inferno and dove beneath it again, planting his hands against the belly. "Keep going up," he shouted to himself and pushed. The devouring demon had grown smarter. It swung at him with fists and sprayed out more dead branch tentacles that wrapped around Harry's arms and torso, pulling him off balance. It continued to descend. Is this the limit? Harry thought, frustration and desperation twisting his face. Then a sharp sound split the air to the side. Harry turned, pupils narrowing. He abandoned the struggle for a heartbeat and rolled aside. Two small missiles, each trailing a tail of flame, struck the devouring demon with unerring accuracy. An instant later, a fireball bloomed in the sky. The blast wave shoved Harry, throwing him a few yards through the air. He steadied himself, heart pounding, and looked toward the origin of the explosions. A red and gold armored suit, gleaming in the smoke and reflecting the fire around it, hovered not far away. Technology, powerful, advanced technology, emanated from it like a presence. A voice crackled, familiar and flippant. "Kid, You can't handle this one. Let the adults deal with it, Tony said from inside the suit. Harry's jaw dropped. Tony, you? Hey, yeah, me. Who else would I be? The voice said. Stay put and don't get in my way. Harry bristled at being talked down to. He snorted. You really think your metal suit can kill this thing? That's naive. Tony's reply was all irreverence. What a rude child. Fine. Just stay out of it and be quiet. The devouring demon, emerging from the smoke, was falling faster. Tony closed the distance and unleashed everything the suit could deliver. Small missiles, repulsor beams from the palms, armor-piercing shells, an airborne arsenal blasting into the creature as if the demon were a weapons test dummy. The sky filled with explosions and streaking shrapnel. Harry watched, grudging admiration replacing some of his contempt. The suit's firepower was overwhelming. He had to admit, talent alone wasn't enough to match that. But admitting it didn't mean he was going to stand aside. He resented being ordered like a child, resented being told he couldn't finish what he'd started. He snorted, more quietly this time, and launched after the devouring demon. Whatever Tony could do, Harry would do his own way. The fight wasn't over yet. Chapter 76, Cooperation. Commissioner, what is that? Iron Man, Tony Stark. Fury's face registered surprise. He hadn't expected Tony to throw himself into something this dangerous. Maybe it was his arrogance or his confidence that made him take the risk. Ever since that day Tony had broken into S.H.I.E.L.D., Fury had been watching him closely. His people had compiled everything they could find on Stark, including technical specs on the Iron Man armor. It wasn't just a suit. It was a mobile arsenal, self-contained, and vastly superior to any fighter jet or tank. Its strategic importance was on par with a nuclear weapon. And Tony Stark was the richest man in the world. He could mass-produce those suits. The conclusion was inevitable. S.H.I.E.L.D. could not afford to make an enemy of Tony Stark. Better to win him over. Official membership in the Avengers might be impossible given Tony's temperament, but he could be a consultant, an asset to be courted. Fury stared at the grainy satellite feed of the Iron Man armor and wondered how best to recruit him. Send in a pretty, covert operative? He smiled thinly at the thought. Tony had no idea Fury was already plotting. Below, Tony was staring in disbelief at the devouring demon plummeting toward the ground. What is that? Is it skin steel? That's not something biology should do. Under repeated bombardment by Iron Man, the creature was far from unscathed, but it hadn't suffered catastrophic damage. Its arms and thighs were intact. A smoldering patch scorched one side of its broad chest, one more battle scar and a long history of fights. Got it, naive uncle, Harry teased as he swooped close to Tony. You can't just talk to this guy. My name is Iron Man, Tony shot back, collecting himself. Looking over the battlefield, he realized why Harry had hauled the creature skyward. The fall alone would slam it into pulp. But they were already high, and the plan carried risks. Jarvis, calculate its trajectory and descent speed. Tony opened the suit's hand and engaged the thrusters on his palms and boots, tucking into a controlled dive. He rocketed beneath the writhing, devouring demon as they both raced toward the Earth. A few kilometers away, in an apartment complex, Jessica and the others could now make out the hulking iron shape of the armor, the thrashing demon, and a blurred figure that had to be Harry. What is that? A robot? Someone muttered. No, it's more than just a robot, Levi replied calmly, nibbling on seeds and sipping iced cola. The distant explosion that followed made even the windows rattle. Tony hit the demon with another salvo of ordnance from below. The counterforce from the explosion fought the creature's inertia and held it aloft. That was the plan. Push it higher. Come get a taste of technology, you damn demon, Tony crowed. The Iron Man suit's hands reconfigured into two massive hammers. With jet assist, Tony blasted upward and struck the devouring demon, sending it climbing again like a helpless rag doll. Flames of rage burst from its maw, and two heat rays shot past, striking the creature's jaw and snapping its mouth shut, saving Tony from being broiled alive. Don't get it twisted. I'm not helping you. I'm just trying to kill the ugly thing, Harry said flatly, though Tony ignored the protest. Not bad, but one suit won't do much. Tony glanced off toward the sky. Who said I only have one? Harry answered, and four more armored figures sliced through the air toward them. They were all Iron Man suits, not much different from Tony's. A pulse of triumphant music from the suits announced their approach. Now it's a show, Tony said, smiling. The 5 suits worked as one. They grabbed the devouring demon's limbs and rocketed upward faster than before. Harry gritted his teeth. He could handle a solo fight, but a coordinated assault from multiple suits was a different thing. He couldn't stand the idea that, to a suddenly appearing monster, he would be second best. No, I'm still the strongest. He just has a suit. I'll get one too. The thought of a suit, something he'd often scorned, suddenly excited him. He already imagined calling Norman and ordering an advanced, invincible costume. Despite his pride, Harry still lent a hand, firing heat rays to neutralize the creature's whipping tentacles and keep Tony safe. With Tony and Harry working in sync, the devouring demon kept rising. They pierced the troposphere within minutes and entered the thin air of the stratosphere. The buildings on the ground blurred into indistinct shapes, and the curve of the earth leaned into view. Harry began to falter. Flesh and blood could not endure the altitude for long without support. Without Harry's burst of stamina, Tony was approaching his limit. That height should do it, Tony said. The 5 suits released the creature, then broke away and regrouped overhead. All at once, they unleashed everything: missiles, repulsors, concentrated attacks. The devouring demon suddenly lost altitude. Its massive body sheared through the rarefied air, heating red and igniting. From a distance, it resembled a meteor with a blazing tail streaking toward the ground. The 5 armors dropped in beside Harry. "Hey, don't relax yet," one of the suits warned. "We need to make sure it doesn't crash downtown." Tony nodded and dived. Harry forced himself to fly alongside him, unwilling to show fatigue in front of strangers, especially ones he resented. Watching the fireball fall, Fury allowed himself a quiet breath of relief, though his face remained wary. If his calculations were right, the devil fruit would appear soon. S.H.I.E.L.D. couldn't let such a dangerous artifact fall into the wrong hands. They had succeeded for now, but this was only the beginning. Chapter 77. Win-win. A blazing fireball screamed down from the sky, trailing thick black smoke. Between Tony's armored suits and Harry's help, the devouring demon was driven straight toward Midtown High School. Jessica and the others who had received the alert evacuated quickly, watching helplessly as the smoking creature slammed into the teaching building. A deafening roar rolled through the air like an avalanche. The multi-story building shuddered, then collapsed into a cloud of dust and debris. Even hundreds of meters away, Jessica felt the ground vibrate and wind press against her face. She covered her mouth and nose, and in a muffled voice asked, "So, does this mean we don't have to go to class for a while?" Uncle Ben glanced at her and shook his head. "Don't worry, I'll ask Chairman Osborne to sort this out." Above the rubble, Tony and Harry hovered, peering into the churning dust. The devouring demon had vanished beneath the wreckage. "If it survives this, I don't know what else to do," Tony muttered. "What, drag it somewhere remote and blow it up with a nuke?" Harry stared at him. "If a nuke can't kill it, we'd just be releasing radiation into the world and making things worse. This thing evolves by devouring. If we can't destroy it, at least we should seal it somewhere empty and lock it away." Tony narrowed his eyes under the mask, thinking. A police helicopter arrived and used its downwash to thin the smoke, but still no sign of the creature. It was buried very deeply beneath the collapsed teaching building. "Jarvis," Tony said, voice clipped, "take one suit down into the ruins and start clearing debris. The others form a perimeter and keep watch." He watched as one of his suits descended into the wreckage while the rest hovered in a loose triangle, scanning for threats. It was slow and painstaking work, but it was safer. Tony had poured too much of himself into those suits to risk losing them. Harry's unease lingered. The longer the demon stayed intact, the more time it had to recover. He didn't wait for orders. With a grunt, he dove into the rubble, hauling up slabs of ceiling and tossing them aside. Jessica and Uncle Ben exchanged a look, nodded, and joined him. "Young people, so impatient, no patience at all," Uncle Ben said with a half smile, as he wrenched free another chunk of concrete. Tony didn't join the effort. He landed in a cleared patch and sat down, the armor's energy reserves depleted after the fight. He needed to conserve power for any contingency. At that moment, Nick Fury arrived, flanked by a dark-faced agent, Agent May. Fury's entrance cut through the dust and lingering adrenaline. "Tony Stark," he said, cutting straight to it. "We meet again." Tony peeled off his mask with a theatrical flourish and grinned. Well, if it isn't Director Fury, where's your super-powered Avengers team? No one thought to show up for a little demon problem? What, did you all call in sick after a bad meal last night? Agent May's face went stone cold. Fury only raised a hand, expression unruffled. They had other priorities, he said. You should understand, Tony, the world is changing. These demons aren't the only threats we'll face. There are far worse things out there. And what's your point? Tony asked. You finally come to congratulate me on a job well done and offer me the captain's chair of the Avengers? Not captain, Fury corrected, a faint smile. Advisor, I want to bring you in as a consultant for S.H.I.E.L.D., on the books, with a formal position. There are things in our custody you can't get access to on your own. Tony's smile hardened into skepticism. Mutual benefit? I can't imagine what S.H.I.E.L.D. has to offer me. Intelligence? Please, I can buy better data than you. Fury's gaze didn't flicker. Not intel. There are artifacts and files connected to your father, Howard Stark. You took some classified S.H.I.E.L.D. material in the past, but as the son of one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s founders, you have a right to view what he left behind, if you're part of S.H.I.E.L.D. Tony snorted. My father's been dead over a decade. What would I want with his stuff? Some notes telling me to stop goofing off and work? That's not exactly treasure. He was more than that, Fury said quietly. Howard Stark helped usher in a new era. There are things he created, technology and records, you don't yet understand the value of. I'm not threatening you, Tony. I'm offering a way for us to cooperate. There will be more enemies like that demon, and sooner or later, you'll need allies. You worked with Homelander this time. Why not work with S.H.I.E.L.D. instead of against us? We could both benefit. Tony let the words sit for a moment, then sighed. I don't like you, Fury, but you're right about one thing. We do have a common enemy. We don't have to be friends, but we can cooperate. He pulled off the armor gauntlet on his right hand and held it out. Happy to cooperate. Fury raised an eyebrow. Since when do you shake hands with people? People change, Tony said. Fury hesitated, then took his hand. The contact was brief, but the second their palms touched, images slammed into Tony's head. Flashes of alien shapes, twisted landscapes, names, Kree, Skrulls, Captain Marvel, then violent visions of New York like he had never seen it. The skyline was torn by a gaping wormhole. Alien soldiers poured into the city from the sky, swarming like a dark tide. Buildings lay in ruins. His own Stark Tower was a broken skeleton. In the center of the devastation, a towering mushroom cloud dominated the horizon, flames engulfing the charred remains of armored suits, familiar silhouettes being consumed by fire. Is this the future? Impossible. No. Tony's chest tightened. He could feel the hair on his arms rise. He would not let that happen. He opened his eyes, pupils glowing faintly red through the visor's HUD, and his expression was hard as steel. No one in the ruined lot could mistake the ferocity in his face. He would fight this, whatever it took. Chapter 78, Despair. Tony? Tony flinched as if the voice had pulled him out of a daze. Tony, are you okay? Fury peered at him, suspicion written across his face. When Fury had taken off his armor and shaken Tony's hand, something about Tony's reaction had been undeniably odd, too odd to be just nerves. Could Tony be hiding something? Fury's mind raced with possibilities. Whatever it was, Tony wasn't going to confess to the director standing in front of him. Before Fury could press the point, Jarvis's voice sounded urgently in Tony's ear. Sir, something is wrong. A strong energy reaction just erupted beneath the ruins. What? Tony barely had time to react. He whipped around and shouted to Harry and the others on the wreckage, "Get clear!" The ground answered him. A violent tremor ran through the site, as if an earthquake had struck. Harry and the rest were alert enough to move immediately. Seconds later, piles of rubble exploded outward, and a huge, human-like arm, big as the building itself, thrust out from under the debris. Green skin made it obvious to everyone what was surfacing, the devouring demon that had been trapped under the ruins. Judging by the size of that hand alone, the thing had multiplied in mass in minutes. Damn, how did it get so big? Tony's face tightened. Fury's expression went equally grim. All nearby civilians have been evacuated, used the gas leak excuse, and the police have formed a cordon. Tony, take it down here. Don't let it get away. You don't have to tell me twice. Tony snapped on his mask, the eye slits glowing red, and rocketed skyward. Fury watched him go, fists clenched. We should move too. Director, aren't we going to engage? Agent Mai asked. Can we match Homelander and Iron Man? Fury said. As much as I hate to admit it, they're the best chance we have. If they fail, the military will consider last resort measures. May's face darkened. The last resort meant missile strikes, possibly nuclear. The collateral damage in that scenario would be catastrophic. Tony hovered over the ruins opposite Harry. Jessica and Uncle Ben watched from a safe distance, speechless and too stunned to speak. The devouring demon had finally crawled free and revealed itself in full, and it had at least doubled in size. Now over 10 meters tall, it loomed like a small mountain. Its features were roughly the same but uglier. Rocky nodules protruded from its skin, making it look even more grotesque. Tony sneered. Guess it ate its way to a growth spurt, dirt, rocks, whatever was underground. Harry's jaw tightened. If you've got a better plan, say it now. Otherwise, we have no choice but to run for our lives. He tried to joke, but Harry didn't mean it. He wouldn't leave. He would hold the thing there at whatever cost. What else can we do? Tony muttered. I plan to exile it into space. If it can't die, it can't harm the Earth. But something this big, no suit in my arsenal can throw it that far. Silence stretched between them, heavy with a sense of helplessness. Then the demon straightened, threw its head back, and laughed, a booming sound that shook the air. Ha ha! No doubt about it. This is the taste of the human world. I have returned to the mortal plane. Tony blinked. Did this thing what's it talking about? The demon turned to him and grinned, revealing a mouth full of terrible teeth. I should thank you for breaking that fool's consciousness. It made it far easier for me to occupy this body. A chill went through the onlookers at the revelation. My name is Bogang, the creature declared in a voice like thunder. I am a demon of devouring. 10,000 years ago, an immortal sealed me in the abyss. Now I am back in the human realm. Wait, what? People murmured. 10,000 years? An immortal? Fury's mind raced. He remembered the former devouring demon. They had fought and apparently defeated a human who became demonic through eating something called the devil fruit. Could that fruit have been a way for this ancient demon to escape? Why had it appeared in a magic item vending machine? Who or what knew enough to put such a thing there? The more Bogang spoke, the more questions piled up. Harry stared at the towering demon now radiating an oppressive aura. Did our actions release a far worse demon? Tony, never one to be intimidated by bluster, called out. Bogang, if you're so grateful, how about a tangible thank you? A gift? Haha, you humans amuse me. Bogang's enormous red eyes fixed on Tony. His gaze seemed to penetrate the armored suit, making Tony sweat. No human has ever spoken to me like that before, Bogang said, curious. Very well. I will be merciful. I shall spare your life on one condition. From now on you will serve me. You will help me rule over mankind. I will be the ruler of your world. Tony raised an eyebrow. Ruling the world? No small ambition. Ever thought about more realistic goals? Get a doctorate, marry a beautiful wife. Though with your face, good luck with that. The jab landed. Bogang understood the mockery. His features darkened, rage swelled. He drew his arm back and smashed a fist toward Tony. The punch compressed the air with a deafening crack as it traveled. Before the fist even reached the suit, the shock wave sent Tony blistering backward. Harry, closer to the impact, was thrown dozens of meters by the blast. A police helicopter caught in the area was obliterated. Sparks and mangled pieces rained down across the ground. Jessica let out a sharp, involuntary breath as she watched the destruction unfold. Chapter 79. Mage high in the Himalayas, hidden from the world, stood an ancient temple, Kamar Taj, a place sacred to every mage. At the mountain's peak, Gui the Ancient One, wrapped in a simple robe, watched the clouds roll by. Her handsome face offered no hint of what she was thinking. A ripple of sparkles announced the arrival of a portal. Mordo, with his thick brows and sharp eyes, stepped through and bowed. Master, Ancient One. Mordo's gaze, clear and probing as ever, met hers. There's something troubling me. I came to tell you. The Ancient One shook her head almost imperceptibly. I don't know. You don't? You ask about the demon people are talking about online. She paused. I cannot confirm whether it's true. Mordo's disbelief flared. How could you not know? You are the Sorcerer Supreme, There's nothing you can't see. You're wrong, Mordo. Her tone was patient. There are places even I cannot pierce. New York, for one. Months ago, a strange force settled over the city and blurred my sight. Mordo's eyes widened. He stared at her as if he might catch her in a trick. If that's true, aren't you curious about it? Mordo? The Ancient One spoke slowly. Curiosity is a dangerous thing for us. Our duty is not to indulge every question. We protect Kamartaj and guard against incursions from the dark dimensions. We act only when a threat endangers the world itself. What about the people dying? Mordo protested. Even if death is natural, these people were killed by something unnatural. We are mages. If there are supernatural forces tearing the laws of nature, we have to stop them. She sighed. I know your heart. I know why you cannot look away. After a moment, she softened. If you must go, go. But take care. Do not bring danger to the New York Temple. Mordo's face lit with resolve. He bowed deeply. Yes, master. With that, he opened a portal and was gone. The Ancient One watched the hollow space where he had been and let out a small, private breath. There was more she had not told him. Since that mysterious, vast power had appeared, even her sight of the future had grown fuzzy. Not even the time stone could clear the fog. The future had become a tangle of possibilities. Any action could ripple outward into countless outcomes, and she could no longer distinguish which path would be right. For now, she told herself, it was safer to follow the course she had already seen and avoid direct confrontation with that shadowy force, at least until her designated successor had taken up the mantle. Only then could she let go without fearing to steer the world into ruin. She closed her eyes and let the wind move over her. Midtown High had become a ruin. Under the onslaught of the devouring creature, Bogang, buildings crumbled like cardboard. Tony Stark and Harry were powerless to close with it. The creature's blows sent them retreating in panic. Even an armored suit had been torn apart trying to shield Jessica and Uncle Ben. All the while, Bogang fed on the rubble, growing larger and tougher with each scrap of debris he swallowed. How do you defeat something like this? Tony muttered, the fight going out of him. His earlier swagger was gone, replaced by a dawning, cold despair. If this continued, New York would be consumed within days, before any other threat even arrived. There has to be an answer. What is it? Harry felt the same helplessness. The powers he once trusted were useless against Bogang. His strongest strikes left no mark, just as his heat beams failed to harm the monster. With every mouthful Bogang consumed, his defenses rose and the gap between them widened into an abyss. A familiar voice called to him from above. Harry swung his head and saw Norman shouting from the helicopter where Jessica and Uncle Ben had been taken aboard. Harry surged up and clung to Norman's arm, panting. Dad, why are you still here? It's too dangerous. You're not leaving yet, Norman said, smiling. He handed Harry a suitcase. You missed these. I didn't get a chance to give them to you earlier. Harry opened it. His gloom lifted as his fingers brushed the suit inside. Is this my battle suit? Norman slapped his shoulder in a way that tried to be reassuring. Only when you put on the suit will you be whole. Go. Your fight isn't over. Harry looked down at the battlefield, doubt still there. But it's so strong, I can't even hurt it. Think, Norman said. Powerful dynasties and mighty organizations in history often fall because of conflicts within. They tear themselves apart from the inside. Something clicked for Harry. He straightened, determination replacing despair. I understand. Thank you, Father. Where a moment before he had been a beaten student, he now flew back toward the monster with purpose. The black cloak behind him snapped in the wind as he cut through the air. Bogang let out a long, wet groan and licked his lips. He eyed the terrified officers massing in the street and chuckled, a sound like boulders grinding. Each step he took shook the ground, sowing panic wherever it landed. Tony dove in front of him, repulsors flaring. Hey, wait, we haven't finished playing, he said, forcing a bravado he didn't feel. How about a different game? Hide and seek? Bogang sneered. You cannot stop me. Saving your own skin is all you've got to be glad of. He ignored Tony and pressed on. If there's someone you care about in that direction, I'll get there faster and eat them first. Tony swallowed. He had no answer, no way to stop the creature as it strode past him. At his side, Harry landed and took a breath. I have an idea, he said quietly.